Behind the Shades.
My name is Maya. And I have a podcast called the Hey Hannah Podcast. So I'm easy to find at www.heyhannahpodcast.com. And for my day job, I work in education. I actually work as a university administrator. But, aside from that, because of just major life changes, I have been able to do a pivot and do some things with podcasting. So I'm kind of wearing several hats at the moment, but things are good.
Perfect, perfect. So I know in the green room we talked about your journey here. So you mentioned the podcast. So take us through that. What's the origins of the podcast and what is it about?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, it's the Hey Hannah podcast. And Hannah is my daughter who passed away on last year. So the premise of the podcast is we have conversations on the platform that I thought I would have the opportunity to have with her. So we talk about all different kinds of stuff. Sometimes it's really emotional. There's some tears, there's some laughing, but as I said, I am in education. So you come away learning some things and you get some laughs and some learning along the way. So that's one thing that you'd enjoy about it if you tune in.
When you got into this, and I know the origins of it is you had a loss in your family, and this was in regards to your daughter, and you named it after her, which I truly feel is amazing because a lot of parents that I deal with, when they're going through loss, they find their ways to kind of remember and celebrate the person that they've lost. That could be a child, it could be a brother, a sister, mother, a father, whomever. So take us through the experience of that when you're trying to overcome this part of your life as you went through it and you shared it with me.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like anyone who's listening and you've dealt with grief or you are currently dealing with grief, they say that grief is one of the things that touches every single part of your life. So it's not anything that ever necessarily grows away. It's just you learn to live your life with the grief aspect now intertwined. And so for me, the podcast came up from just a recommendation from a therapy session. Like, I can't remember exactly how the line of the conversation was going, but basically my therapist recommended you should do some journaling. And so I'm like, it's not really my thing. I don't really want to journal. And so I was very, I just wasn't with doing it because I just didn't enjoy it. And so, I kind of start thinking through like, man, this is 2022, like there has to be a better way. Like we've come past the journaling if I want to do something different. And so the podcast idea came about, and so that's why it was born. And so I specifically named the podcast Hey Hannah because I do have two living children, and all of us say this around the house all the time. We're like, hey, such and such, hey, this, we say it all day between my husband and the boys. And so I was like, the one thing, and I say that in the trailer, that you won't ever hear here is, hey, Hannah, because she's not here. So that's how we got the name. And that's just really the premise of the show. Now, every episode is not like, oh, we're having a conversation about grief and loss and my specific loss with her. But every time, I go on the platform, I get an opportunity to say her name. It's a platform that's near and dear to my heart. So even if we're having a conversation about, what's going on in higher education and how individuals are contributing to the scope of that in the future, I still have the opportunity to know, like, within myself, like it's a nod to her. I remember her. She's still a part of everything that I'm doing.
There are times where I always think about what would happen if I experience a loss because I haven't experienced a loss that's close to my heart. And one of the closest people to me is my grandmother. And she's the one that raised me because I grew up without my mother or my father. So I didn't know them. It was, Big Mama, as I call her, right? And she's probably going by age. That's probably going to be the first person that passes away that is very, very close to me. And I remember a time where I went to go pick her up at the airport and she came out in a wheelchair because she's an older lady. And that
Yeah.
was the first time that my grandmother appeared old to me. She was always Wonder Woman, right? She was this incredible
Yeah.
source of strength. And it changed everything because it brings you to the fact that we're very, very fragile creatures. We can go any single time. As you look back on what your podcast means, and as you mentioned, it's Hey Hannah because you're you're keeping the name alive, and I think that's very, very important. If someone was going through something similar where they would have a loss, what are some of the ways that you believe worked for you that you'd want to share with them, maybe outside of the podcast?
Yeah. The first thing I'll say is there's not really any right or wrong way to grieve. So, whatever process or whatever, some people practice avoidance, and that's just kind of like your fight or flight mechanism. So, you're thinking to myself, like, I'm just going to avoid it because I got to keep myself safe. I got to keep myself moving. So, there's not a right or wrong way that I would say, but I think it's a matter of letting yourself feel the emotions that you feel, because sometimes it can be overwhelming, and that's fine. You'll have those days. If you just need to cry and get it out, cry and get it out. Like, don't feel like you don't have the opportunity to do that. One of the recommendations I had early on, especially when it was just like really high and low, is set aside some time that is, well, for me, it was called Hannah time. So it could be like Thursdays at 1 or whatever it is that you need. And I know this is my time set aside to just like feel what I'm feeling. If I want to look at some pictures, if I want to just replay things I wish would have been different, that type of thing. Like, it's coming, and you have that space to just sit there and feel what you feel. You don't have to solve any problems. Just give yourself that grace, to really be able to do that.
Do you feel that you're honoring her in a way that would make her smile wherever she is, looking perhaps down on you for those who follow that type of thinking and belief?
Um, hmm. I think so. You know, when you have children, like, you have all of these hopes and dreams for them, it's just kind of like prematurely you're just planning things out. It's just kind of a part of how it goes. And just thinking about her, I'm like, this girl's gonna be able to be the president because I'm gonna tell her this and I'm gonna tell her, all these types of things. And, just really thinking about, like, I want her to be strong. I want her to be smart. I want her to be bold. I want her to be able to clearly articulate herself, all of these types of things. And so I say that to say, I hope that she would be proud of the fact that in spite of such a train wreck, so to speak, I'm still able to make some sort of progress forward. I would want her here to be a woman that, understands life gets hard, but it is still going to move forward. And I want her to be able to be strong in the moment and feel like she would have been able to do that too. So for that reason, I feel like she would probably be smiling like, yeah, that's my mom. She's still doing it.